So we have an update to go over on the Elgton Jenkins contract situation. Of course, in the past few months, it came out that with Elgton Jenkins moving to center, he wanted to be basically financially compensated for the future because he's moving to a position that makes less money at center. And so there was an update from Rob Demovsky yesterday on Twitter. And here's what Demovsky said. This is in light of Zach Tom getting a new contract extension yesterday. Rob Demovsky says, quote, "I'm told this doesn't impact Elgton Jenkins' situation one way or the other. Sounds like the Packers are willing to talk, but possibly not till later in the season after he's settled in at center. Will be interesting to hear Jenkins' thoughts when we can talk to him in camp." So first off, the fact that it sounds like they're willing to talk, looks like they haven't been talking based on that information there. And then second off, the fact that it says the Packers are willing to talk, but possibly not till later in the season, that's something that could make this very complicated because Elgton Jenkins sounds like he wants to have his contract reworked. And he was willing to sit out different voluntary offseason workouts. He was at minicamp, but sort of held in, didn't participate, but was still there. And so now the question becomes, how set is Elgton Jenkins on needing to get his contract reworked? And if the Packers are not willing to, talk about this until later in the season, will Elgton Jenkins be willing to sit out until the Packers come to the table and they work on some kind of agreement? And so just in my mind, the fact that it says here that possibly the Packers are not willing to talk, possibly till later in the season, it makes it sound to me like the Packers aren't super, or they don't think they necessarily need to come in and just right away solve this problem with Elgton Jenkins and his contract. And if you're the Packers, I fully understand if they're not willing to come in and meet Elgton Jenkins' demands. Just because if you think about it from the Packers' perspective, sure, Elgton Jenkins moving from center or from guard to center, which centers make overall less money typically than guards do, but at the time, it's not like he's taking a pay cut to move to center. While playing center this season, he would still be making the guard money. So from the Packers' perspective, they could say, well, we're still paying you as a guard, and so it's not up to us to compensate you for future things. We're compensating you right now for playing guard even though you're moving to center. But on the other hand, I do understand Elgton Jenkins because in his mind, he's probably looking at this and saying to himself, sounds like he's willing to move to center, but at the same time, he has to understand that if he sort of puts himself in the, sort of locks himself in as a center going into the next, 3-4 seasons near the end of his career potentially, then if he leaves the Packers after this year, after next season, what if teams now see him as a center and he doesn't make as much money in the future? And so I sort of understand where Jenkins is coming from. And so this is just going to be something to watch, which side is going to be super stuck in. Are they both going to stay right where they are? Are the Packers not going to be willing to talk until later? Is Jenkins going to say, well, then, okay, I'm not going to play until we talk and get this resolved? And so it just makes me wonder, could this get to a point where neither side is willing to move from where they are? And could something else happen? Like if that happened and there was no resolution, would there be a trade? Could something like that happen? I don't know. We'll sort of have to wait and see if it could get to that point. But just the fact that the Packers are possibly not wanting to talk till later in the season, that's going to make this a little complicated because I thought maybe there's a chance early on in camp the Packers say, okay, we'll resolve this quickly. But it looks like that may not happen. It does say possibly. So there's a chance things get ironed out quickly, which I think would be best case scenario. Because when you look at this Packers offensive line, Elgton Jenkins has been a really, really good guard. The only issue is that last season, Jenkins and Jordan Love didn't have, many snaps together with Jenkins at center. Elgton Jenkins only played 72 snaps at center last season in 2024, and the only other center snaps he has played in the NFL have been in 2020 with 297 center snaps. Of course, that was with Aaron Rodgers in 2020. And so I think sometimes it can take time for the quarterback and center to build that chemistry together and get to where they're completely comfortable with each other. And so best case scenario is day one of camp, Jenkins and Love are starting to build that chemistry. It doesn't look like that is going to happen. You also throw in the fact that now Elgton Jenkins is on the NFI, the non-football injury list, and so we also have to keep an eye on that injury and see how long it takes for him to come back from that. So we're watching the injury, we're watching the contract situation, and the longer it goes on, the longer through camp that Elgton Jenkins is not playing at center with Jordan Love, it just gets, the closer you get to the season, let's say Jenkins is able to come in a week before. Let's say they get the contract situation ironed out. That only gives you a few practices to practice with each other before the game week 1. Sure, it could work out fine, but you would rather them maybe have a month together getting everything ironed out. So then, if Jenkins isn't practicing, then that means Jacob Monk, 5th-round pick last year, and Sean Ryan as well, will likely get a ton of work at center. And the only concern there is last season, both of those guys combined, who both seem to potentially be the backup centers if Jenkins isn't playing, only a total of 9 snaps at center between those two players last season. Of course, Jacob Monk came in last year, and he didn't play any snaps on the offensive line last season. He did play in the preseason a little bit, but not in the regular season. And then Sean Ryan only had 9 snaps at center last year. He had 1,010 at right guard. And so there's some uncertainty there. But I guess the one positive of this situation is that the Packers will get to see what Jacob Monk has to offer at center and what Sean Ryan has to offer at center if Elgton Jenkins is not participating. And so maybe the Packers see something they like. And then on the one hand, it makes you wonder, could that give the Packers more leverage? Because let's say Jacob Monk comes in, for example, and looks really, really good. The Packers could say, well, now we're definitely not going to talk with Jenkins. We're willing to pay him what he's getting paid right now, but we're not going to adjust his contract. And then what would Elgton Jenkins think about that? So I'm not saying that it's like Jacob Monk or Sean Ryan is an easy replacement for Jenkins, because Jenkins has been a really, really solid offensive lineman. And no doubt he is the best option. He will be very good at center, in my opinion. And so there's a ton of uncertainty there with Monk and Sean Ryan. And I feel like if you're Elgton Jenkins, you probably feel like you have a good amount of leverage just because of the uncertainty that if you weren't there, what do the Packers have? I don't know if they may have some ideas about what they have, but when you have guys who have barely played, there's just a lot of uncertainty there. And so I think it would be a massive risk to go into this season with Jacob Monk or Sean Ryan. Maybe after 2 weeks of camp, they are more confident in that. But as I said in the past week or two, I do think it's pretty important for the Packers to get this situation ironed out with Elgton Jenkins. And so if he wants a little more guaranteed money, I think the Packers should do it. And that's something we'll just have to keep an eye on as we, move forward in the next week and in the next couple weeks. And hopefully something gets ironed out soon. And we also need to figure out what Jenkins' injury is and how serious it is, because if that's super serious, then that's something we'll have to keep an eye on as well. So that's pretty much it for this video. If you want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe down below. I will be out with videos throughout the week breaking down what's going on at training camp, so feel free to stay tuned for that. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.